This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. The proverbial other shoe has now fallen in the federal case against former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell for accepting gifts from a wealthy businessman. The Republican, McDonnell, and his wife were charged today in federal court with illegally taking loans, clothes, vacations, and other items from a Richmond man who wanted special treatment for his struggling company. Late this afternoon, McDonnell released a statement saying, quote, "I deeply regret accepting legal gifts and loans from Mr. Williams, all of which I have been repaid with interest, and I have apologized for my poor judgment, for which I take full responsibility. However, I repeat emphatically that I did nothing illegal for Mr. Williams in exchange for what I believed was his personal generosity and friendship. I never promised, and Mr. Williams and his company never received any government benefit of any kind from me or my administration. We did not violate the law." Joining me now to discuss this case, the host of On the Record, Greta Van Susteren. Good evening, Greta.
Good evening.
I tell you, I've been looking over this detailed indictment, 14 counts. It seems pretty serious.
Well, you know, if I were the defense lawyer, I'd feel sick in the pit of my stomach having read this. Now, this is one-sided. This is just the government's version. However, it is very detailed in what they say that the governor's wife did, which was accept a number of gifts, and the gifts are quite extraordinary. Whether it's a ride in whether it's lending the Ferrari to the governor, or a Rolex watch, or trips, or designer dress. I mean, there's a whole list of things. The governor says, well, that he thought he was getting that out of generosity and friendship. However, if you read the indictment, he'd only met this man 6 months before he was actually elected as governor, so I don't know how long their friendship is. The fact that he paid it back, that's not going to get him off the hook. What he's got to show, and of course he doesn't have the burden of proof, but what the jury has to believe in the state of Virginia, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that the businessman, got something of value from the governor, quid pro quo, for all the gifts.
Well, how this is structured as you read it, is that laid out in detail in here? And do you think the prosecutors are ready to go into exactly what he got, what that company got?
As I said, if I were the defense lawyer, and I've read a lot of indictments, I've represented a lot of defendants, I'd feel sick in the pit of my stomach reading this indictment. If they can prove what's in this indictment, it's not very hard, because a lot of it's a paper trail, a lot of it has to do with signatures, a lot has to do with events, and they can place these people together on these particular days that they allege that things were happening, whether it's an event at the governor's mansion or whatever. It is pretty detailed. And it's not that difficult, I don't think, you know, assuming that this isn't all fiction, and I assume it's not all fiction, but the government says it can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, and that will be the test.
Governor McDonnell and his wife are set to be arraigned January 24th in Richmond. Greta, as always, thank you. More on the record at the top of the hour. The Supreme Court today heard arguments on a case that could radically alter the way labor unions are able to force themselves on the labor force in this country. The specifics involve home-based healthcare workers in Illinois, but the broader ramifications could be nationwide. Correspondent Shannon Bream has more.
Every individual should have the freedom to choose exactly what special interest group, if any, they want to support.
William Messenger, attorney for the home health care workers who say their constitutional rights are being violated because they're forced to pay dues to a union they want nothing to do with, is hopeful the U.S. Supreme Court may be about to make a change Justice Elena Kagan today said would, quote, radically restructure the way workplaces across this country are run. In 2003, the state of Illinois amended its Public Labor Relations Act to define personal care attendants as state employees for the purpose of collective bargaining. Home health care workers who refuse to join still have to pay union dues. State officials say the plan is stabilize the industry in Illinois.
The wages have increased, the benefits have increased, and therefore we're able to provide a situation where people with disabilities and people who are aging can still remain in their homes where they want to be. They can still remain independent.
But workers like Susie Watts, who is a home attendant solely so she can care for her disabled daughter, say they shouldn't have to spend a dime backing a union message they don't agree with.
And Libby's not able to walk or talk. She's had 79 surgeries. I love her to death. She's my daughter. I don't need the interference of a union. I am grieved that I'm considered a public employee. It was not by choice.
Today, the justices sparred over whether Watts and the other plaintiffs' First Amendment rights are being violated. Justice Sonia Sotomayor asking their attorney, quote, where's the First Amendment abridgment? They can do whatever they want. They can speak however they want in support of or in opposition to absolutely anything the union is doing. Within seconds, Justice Antonin Scalia asked, quote, I suppose the fact that you're entitled to speak against abortion would not justify the government in requiring you to give money to Planned Parenthood? While most of the justices appeared sympathetic to one side or the other, Justice Scalia actually had tough questions for both sides, and he could wind up being the key in this case. But to wipe out the ability of states to put these kinds of union-friendly policies in place, well, the court would have to overturn one of its own decades-old precedents, which upheld the government's right to force payment of so-called fair share public union dues. We'll get a decision by June. Brett.
Okay, Shannon, thank you. More on this with the panel. Stocks were mixed today. The Dow lost 44, the S&P 500 gained 5, the Nasdaq was up 28. Washington is the center of the abortion rights debate the next few days. As the anniversary of the landmark Roe v. Wade decision nears, masses of pro-life demonstrators are descending on the nation's capital, albeit a snowy one tonight. Here's Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel.
Outside the White House, a pro-life group held this die-in demonstration featuring young people in a fetal position on Pennsylvania Avenue and red blankets being placed over them protesting abortion. This just one of the events related to the annual March for Life rally, marking 41 years since the landmark Roe v. Wade Supreme Court ruling. There's clearly an effort to energize youth support against abortion.
Over 1 million a year. These are people like that could have been my friends. A third of my generation that's missing because of the great violence of abortion.
Planned Parenthood also has its eyes on young people, telling Fox, quote, this year Planned Parenthood Generation Action programs already on more than 200 campuses across the country are focused on harnessing the power, energy, and enthusiasm of young people to fight for reproductive freedom and for fundamental justice for all.
Wake up this generation, Father God. It is time that we bring an end to the bloodshed.
The day's March for Life event started with this vigil in front of a Washington, D.C. Planned Parenthood. Organizers say they hope those attending this week's march will be inspired by the movement.
There's no doubt that we're gaining supporters, and not only among the young, among every age group. And one of the reasons is that those who have had abortions are learning from experience that it doesn't solve any problems, it only creates more.
A Fox News poll right before the 2012 election showed pro-choice voters outnumbering pro-life by 24 points with the 18 to 29-year-old subset. Then there was the trial and verdict in the gruesome case of abortion doctor Kermit Gosnell in Philadelphia. A Fox News poll taken during the trial showed the gap had closed to 9 points, 50 to 41. And those involved in the pro-life movement say disturbing stories like Gosnell have an impact.
That stuff causes them to think about this, because what Kermit Gosnell was doing for the most part was legal. The state of Pennsylvania just never bothered to inspect his abortion facility, and they weren't required to. And this is how he was serving women.
Organizers say the goal for this March for Life is to mobilize and encourage those who participate and to send a message to the government that they are not going away until unborn children are protected. Brett?
And we'll have full coverage of the march tomorrow. Mike, thank you. A follow-up tonight on a story we brought you in Monday's Grapevine about how one of the Democratic Party's rising stars may have padded her rags to riches origin story. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen with the fact and the fiction behind Wendy Davis.
After a filibuster against pro-life legislation in Texas last summer vaulted her to the front ranks of pro-choice politicians in the Democratic Party, State Senator Wendy Davis launched a gubernatorial bid facing off against GOP Attorney General Greg Abbott.
She married young and by 19 was divorced and raising me as a single mother.
I know she's kind of capitalized on her, harrowing story of being a single mother that was struggling through law school and raising her daughters, and a lot of people have kind of sympathized with her over that. And now that it's come to light that, well, some of those details may not be totally correct, I think some voters or some people that were thinking of voting for her are going to have a problem with that.
Indeed, the Dallas Morning News disclosed on Saturday that Davis was 21 when she was officially divorced from the first of her two husbands, that her second husband received custody of her two daughters and paid for much of her education at college and Harvard Law. At first, Davis told the paper, "My language should be tighter." Later, she issued a statement saying, "We're not surprised by Greg Abbott's campaign attacks on the personal story of my life as a single mother who worked hard to get ahead. But they won't work," she said, "because my story is the story of millions of Texas women."
General Abbott, how you doing?
Abbott, reported to enjoy a $20 million war chest, said through a spokesman, "It's disappointing that a candidate would so cavalierly deceive voters about the most basic aspects of their life while providing inaccurate testimony in the process. If voters can't trust what Senator Davis says, how can they trust her to lead?"
If you're going to run on your narrative, you really ought to make sure your narrative is accurate. Her much larger problem is that Texas is still heavily Republican, and she is still a very significant underdog.
Late today, the Davis campaign blasted out a feisty letter in the senator's defense and asking recipients to sign it as a show of support. There was no direct appeal for money, but campaign aides would not rule out future solicitations being directed at those who signed the letter. Brett.
James, thank you. Louisiana Republican Senator David Vitter says he will run for governor next year. Vitter says in an email to supporters he thinks he can have a bigger impact for the people of his state. Incumbent Governor Bobby Jindal cannot run again because of term limits. Up next, what to expect from the big winter storm hitting the Northeast. But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 32 in Chicago, with how the third largest archdiocese in the country reportedly moved priests accused of child sexual abuse from parish to parish while hiding their histories from the public. The archdiocese released a statement saying they're working on regaining trust. WXIN in Indianapolis with a fatal shooting on the Purdue University campus in West Lafayette, Indiana, about an hour away. Authorities say one person was killed and a suspect is in custody. And this is a live look at Diamond Head and Waikiki Beach from our Fox affiliate KHON in Honolulu, where it is almost a perfect 80 degrees right now. The big story there tonight is preparation for the NFL's Pro Bowl this Sunday from Aloha Stadium. And, well, we just wanted to show you 80-degree Hawaii. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway. From Special Report, we'll be right back.